Good evening. This is sort of an unscheduled stream. I didn't think I'd make it this evening, but I figured I'll might as well give it a shot. And if nobody chimes in, I'll just, I guess, talk to myself for a few minutes. I am, as you can see, behind me is a wall of another unnamed hotel room. That's sort of my life these days. It's my last evening here. I'm in the southern portion of New Mexico. I have some work to do at the White Sands Missile Range. Tomorrow is the last day, and then I head home. The topic of today's conversation is a little bit unusual, I suppose, for the types of things that I do. But if anybody's still awake, I know it's late on the East Coast already. If anybody's still awake, I'll obviously take whatever questions you guys may have. And if not, I'll say what I want to say, wrap up, and go to sleep. One of the things that I found interesting, and this came out of a conversation I had with a friend of mine a couple of days ago, is on how much we project when we look at new product introductions, how much we project our own beliefs, preferences, choices, day-to-day shooting, how much we project that to what we think the market will be interested or willing to do. Mr. Link, how are you, sir? The very good example was the Vortex Viper HD that was recently introduced, and these are basically, hunting scopes, right? And people have come out and said, okay, this is a replacement for the original Viper. These are aimed at the hunting crowd, this and this, and every other post on it, on different forums, is, oh my goodness, it lacks this feature, that feature, and all those features, for the most part, that are called out are the things you would need for more of a precision-oriented stuff. And that's not what the scope is for. It's not a PST Gen 3. So PST Gen 3, whenever that comes, is going to be more oriented toward precision shooting with mid-range optics. And the Viper HD is unabashedly hunting scope line. I've talked about it last time. But then I look again at the reaction people have to it, and they are clearly unable to separate their own personal preferences from what other people may need. It's a very interesting phenomenon. I suppose we'll all do it to a significant degree. Now that I sit and think about it, and that is probably one of the big reasons why I go through such excruciating detail in trying to explain my choices and preferences. I do so in order to explain why I like or dislike certain things for certain applications, and why that may or may not make sense to you. Right? Mr. Link. People seems to have high expectation of Viper since the competition is stiff and under 1,000 range. Well, I haven't seen the Viper HDs yet, right? So I'm probably going to get my hands on one and take a look. The competition under $1,000 is indeed very, very stiff. So these have to perform. Whether they're up to the task or not is very hard to say. A couple of people at Vortex I've talked to about it are saying that the optical system is done very nicely. So chances are these scopes will do well, and the Vortex marketing machine is going to help. But when I first went and looked at them, my first look was, okay, this is not something I'm hugely interested in, right? And I take half a step back and go, oh, well, maybe not so fast. And then I started going over my head over the list of different applications, environments, hunting scenarios they have to cover, and I went, okay, this makes a little bit more sense now. But I'm fundamentally a precision guide hard, so my first look at them was also, okay, I don't know how interested I am. And then when I gave it a little bit of time and tried to detach the way I think from what I do, give it a chance, then I became more interested. Okay? And that's sort of the fundamental problem. Now, the competition is indeed very stiff, and under $1,000, you have the best of the Chinese scopes, some of the best of the Philippine-made scopes, and even some Japanese ones, right? If you are talking about basic hunting scopes, for example, my quote unquote default recommendation for a core hunting scope has been for a while now, Trijikan Occupoid, um, or Credo, for example, right? So they have a 3 to 9, 2.5 to 10, and all sort of stuff. Second focal plane, simple Japanese scopes, made for a long time, work well, hold zero, quite good optically. The better Chinese stuff is up there, although Chinese companies haven't made as many hunting scopes in this range. They've leaned a little bit more toward the crossover precision world, but there are some of the nicer athlons that are kind of in that range. Chinese RAM scopes like Mi Optus Optica 5, and then the $600 range, they're going to compete with some of the new Vipers. And there will be a few others. Others will be released. I think Burris has a few there, but I just haven't had a chance to look at the second focal plane stuff again because I am fundamentally a precision-oriented guy. I gravitate toward a particular rifle scope type. What else is there? So Delta titanium scopes, although they're not hugely prominent in the United States, they're well-made Japanese scopes, and they are in that $800, $900 range. I have a 1.5 to 9x45 that is very, very good. So the competition is indeed going to be stiff. Expectations are indeed high. But in terms of configurations, I see a ton of people discarding these scopes because they don't fit their needs. And that's probably accurate. They probably don't fit their needs. But they fit a lot of other needs out there. And that's probably a pretty good preamble toward what works for different types of hunting across North America. Right? When I talk to hunters from back east, they've never shot anything further than 100 yards away, sometimes further than 50 or 60. And they can't figure out for the life of them why I'd want a 4 to 20 on my hunting rifle. Right? And why I'd want anything beyond a simple duplex or a number 4 reticle. Or why I'd want anything with a large objective, or why I'd potentially need something with high magnification. And in the grand scheme of things, they are right for their needs. You need something adequately lightweight, reasonably compact, something that stays zeroed, gives you reasonable image quality, especially if you're in the woods, lighting conditions. Might be rough. You don't care about turrets. You don't care about tracking. You don't care about 3 reticles. You may not care about illumination. Some states allow it. I think some states ban it. I'm not up to speed on the. Sorry, my neck's aching. Up to speed on some of the hunting regulations. So they don't care. And for half the country, probably close to it, that translates. That's a perfectly reasonable approach, right? So they are, on the other hand, when they talk to people who live out west, well, like me, they are projecting and they are wrong. Hunting in New Mexico here, I don't think the closest shot I've taken in game was more than 300 yards because it couldn't get close enough. Where I was, the terrain was not hospitable for that. That's just the truth of it. If I were to take a simple 3 to 9 scope with covered turrets and a duplex reticle and try to shoot a sheep with it at 450 yards, that would be tricky. I'd have to pull off the covers and try to dial, and hopefully that scope dials. It just would not be the right optic for the job. Interestingly, and that's kind of a one way of saying this, a projection. The other direction is a little bit less egregious, is that if I take my Western hunting scope and go back east, as long as the reticle is reasonably visible at lower powers, I'm probably going to do okay. It's an overkill. You don't need all of that, but it's a little bit more. It's a little bit more adaptable. That's one of the reasons why, for the last several years, when I've been talking about what constitutes a truly general purpose hunting scope, that configuration has changed over the years. All right, so for a long time, the general purpose hunting scope was a 3 to 9 by 40, and that still holds to some degree, but technology has moved on, right? And a very good example of a properly configured truly general purpose hunting scope is something like the Vortex Razor HDL-HT 3 to 15 by 42. Why do I use that one? It's not super heavy. I think it's about 19 ounces, something like that. It goes down to 3. Okay, so you can use that where you need wide field of view and close range, and compared to the short distances. It goes up to 15, which is enough to shoot comparatively far away. It has side focus, so you are able to focus on things that are a little further out, cut down parallax and all that, but has enough depth of field. You don't need to. You don't have to do it if you're within a reasonable range of distances. Windows turret is covered. Elevation turret is exposed, but it's locking, so if you don't need to use it, you don't have to. And there is push button illumination. I'm not a big fan of push button illumination, but it's reasonable and obtrusive. So that works. And it's not only the scope of this type. Leopold has a VX5 3 to 15 that's configured very similarly. And there are a few others like this. And that's become sort of a general purpose hunting scope. If you don't know where you're going to hunt, if you have one rifle and you dial, that's pretty much where to go. These are second focal plane reticles, so the good reticle visibility and all that. If you're only going to hunt out west, you can be more specialized, right? If you're only going to hunt back east, you can be a more specialized towards smaller scope. But if you want general purpose, well, those are your options. Mr. Link, have you seen the new Vortex Venom 3 to 15 by 45? Yeah, briefly. Excuse me, I haven't spent a lot of time with it. I saw it. What was your question? Excuse me. Let's see. Mr. Lakeshore guy, how are you, sir? Somebody's still awake. Sorry, there was no warning for this. I didn't think I was going to be able to do this. But it's my last night in the hotel. Once I get home, all the honeydews and other things drop on me. I thought I'd do a live stream while I can. Anyhow, Link, you asked me about the Venom 3 to 15 by 44. Any specific questions about it, or anything particular that's of interest to you? Why are you asking? How does it compare to other 3D15s on the market? Honestly, so I didn't spend a ton of time with it. It's hard to say. Optically, I thought for the money it was very nice. A major turnoff for me is that the reticle is not illuminated, and that Vortex is, I think it has 7C in it, EBR 7C, gets fairly thin on low power. It focuses very close. It's very budget friendly. I haven't tested it, but for what I hear, it tracks just fine. Optically, it's quite good for the money. No real problems there. But it is not a scope that excites me, because with front focal plane designs that go down like that, I really like have illumination. Otherwise, I'm just getting too old to clearly see the reticle on low power. Optically, it is pretty good. If the reticle was thicker, I'd be probably more interested. As is, I glanced at it and I was not planning to do a review simply because of my own personal preferences. I suspect it will do pretty well for the market because it does give you very good image quality for the money. This is the one I've seen. I've only seen one. The scope that surprised me from Vortex was the 3 to 18 by 42 strike eagle. I thought it was a very nice design. But there's kind of still a fundamental problem of sorts in that you kind of have to pick your battles and figure out what's important for you. For example, it's a conversation I had with another gentleman who works for an optics company. And what I was trying to figure out is for Western hunting, which ostensibly takes you to longer distances, for Western hunting, are the majority of the scopes that people use second focal plane or front focal plane? I know that the proportion of front focal plane scopes is growing. But when I think about it and talk to people, I think more people still use second focal plane scopes than front focal, although that proportion is totally shifting. So if you are a manufacturer aiming your product line at general purpose hunting, even at Western hunting, you better have both front focal plane and second focal plane options, right? And the front focal plane guys are going to lament loudly, who needs those second focal plane ones? And second focal plane guys will do the exact same thing in reverse because everybody is projecting their needs and their preferences, what other people will buy. Mr. Link. So the newest WFA are all fixed powered, no new 329, 315, 520 yet. That is correct. So there are some variable scopes coming a little bit later, but a lot of the first introductions are going to be all fixed power ones. Mr. Lakeshore guy, I don't get why so many people like SFP over FFP. Honestly, I've been wondering about that for years, and I don't fully understand it for precision use especially, but I've sort of resigned myself that is the case. Now, to be fair, from the precision side of things, the younger generation leans fairly strongly toward FFP. The older guys, quite a few of them still use second focal plane. For hunting, as we talked briefly, if you are out west where you're essentially always shooting within maximum point blank range, and often much closer than that, second focal plane scopes work great. Reticle visibility is good. There's very little downside toward it. And I kind of get that. I have a takedown lever gun at 300 WSM, and on it I have a 1.5 to 9 by 45 Delta titanium. It's a second focal plane scope with a very bright illuminated reticle and number 4 design, very visible, quite fast. And for the distances where I'm going to use this lever gun, despite a nicely powerful cartridge, that's a nearly ideal design, and the reticle visibility there makes more difference. Is more important for me. I'm not planning to range or do hold over anything like that with the reticle within reason. Mr. Link. Second focal plane cheaper maybe. For the light optics works 6 to 36. It is like Razer Gen 3 is better than Theos, better than Zeiss S3. So second focal plane is a little bit cheaper to make, but it's not a big difference at all. As far as how the different light optics works, 6 to 36 scopes rank, it kind of depends on what's important for you. In terms of pure image quality, I think their Gen 3 Razer is the best one of that family. Well, the other ones are very, very nice as well. The eyepiece in the Razer is a little bit different, and it's very good optically, and it has the most forgiving eyepiece of the bunch, although the other ones are still very good. Theos has the best turrets, right? So if you're gonna, in my opinion, at least in terms of few. So if you're okay with a double turn turret, so Razor is at 10 milliradian per turn, a triple turn elevation turret, and Theos is a double turn 12 milliradian per turn. But the feel on the Theos is better. So if you are twisting turrets all the time, then Theos is the way to go. Zeiss S3 is actually quite nice on the 6 to 36 especially. And it's more or less up there. I think the Theos has better turrets. But on the other hand, if you look at Theos, or if you look at the reticle in the Theos, while it is a nice reticle, one of the things that I don't like about it is that the whole reticle, the whole tree is illuminated, and the competition guys like it. I'm not a big fan of that, right? And we've talked about it with the guys from Element, and it is a reasonable disagreement, right? The illumination methods that I like are where either just the center is illuminated or just the primary stadia are illuminated. Vortex has on the Gen 3 finally moved to just having the center stadia illuminated, just the primary, right? So you basically have like a T like this that's illuminated, but the tree is not, and that's what I like. So depending on if you, for example, are gonna do crossover thing and try to hunt at night, to me the Theos reticle is a problem, just because of how it's illuminated. Great for competition. The way Zeiss illuminates it, they illuminate a comparatively smaller thing in the center. I think that's great, and the way Razor illuminates it is also great. Razor Gen 3, as much as I like that scope, the reticle is quite thin, and they do not have the thick bars on the outside. So if you spend a lot of time in lower magnifications, the Razor Gen 3 reticle may not be ideal for you, right? So if you look at the 6 to 36 and you think you're going to spend most of your time in high magnifications, I think Razor Gen 3 is the best one of these, right? If you think you're going to spend more time in lower magnifications, I think the Zeiss S3 reticle, the milliradian one, I don't think I've seen the MOA. Let me pull it up. I don't remember what Zeiss's MOA reticle looks like. Let me pull it up just to remind myself. The milliradian reticle actually works really well across the magnification range. I think they did a very nice job with it. There go reticles. Yeah, bingo. Yeah, so the way Zeiss did the illumination is very respectable. Just the center is illuminated, which is kind of thing I like. When you go down on low power, they're fairly prominent sidebars, so you can see the reticle well. And okay, so the milliradian reticle is a tree reticle. MOA is kind of a minor grid. Yeah, I don't know if I like that MOA reticle, but Zeiss's milliradian reticle I do like. I think it works very nicely, and I think it works, of the three you mentioned, I think it works the best across the magnification range. So look at all this and make your choice, right? If you live on high magnification, Razor. If you value turrets the most, Element Theos. If you need the reticle to be most usable in lower powers, Zeiss. Just go to that. And moving on, link. On a higher end, it's tangent 7 to 35 over Schmidt over Z-comp. Yes. In terms of, so okay, so before we go to the tangents and stuff, ZS3 has diffractive reticle illumination. I have seen the report that it's much brighter than usual. So honestly, I don't know. S5, I think, has diffractive reticle. S3, I thought, had conventional illumination. And I have not spent enough time with it to really explore it. It might have diffractive reticle illumination, but I'm not so sure. S5 definitely does. S3, I don't know. Anyhow, going back to the high end. So on the high end, it was really interesting. With the zero compromise, I didn't like. I saw several 8 to 40s. I was trying to figure out what gives, and I basically decided that I just don't like them. So a couple of good ones, and the rest of them were, in my opinion, not up to par. And then I started kind of going over my notes and looking at what I have on the ZComp. And it's interesting. I honestly think of the three models that ZComp has, Zero Compromise has, and they're all very nice scopes, right? But they're competing in a very, very challenging price segment. I think the 4 to 20 is the best optimized of them. 5 to 27 is still very good. I think 4 to 20 is better. And 8 to 40, I think, is the weakest of the three. I don't know. Maybe they optimized it around the 4 to 20 region or something. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for why. But I think 8 to 40 is a little bit weak. The Schmidt that I've tested is very good. I've seen a couple of people who were not as happy with it. But on balance, I think Schmidt is a good scope. Honestly, I think these Japanese 6 to 36 scopes are dangerously close to the stuff like the Zero Compromise and the Schmidt. In terms of the overall performance, how polished it is, how well everything is optimized, I think Tangent is still, honestly, still the top. When I spent some time and really looked at them at high magnifications, especially, Tangent is pretty freaking remarkable. How well it carries contrast at the high magnifications, how well the image quality persists as you go off axis, as you dial the turrets. It's very impressive. It's I have some friends in the industry who don't work with Tangent and who will quietly and candidly tell me like how freakishly well optimized that scope is. Um, there is, I know people complain that I have a soft spot for Tangent, but there is a reason for it. They are really, really good, and Tangent does all the little things really, really well. But on a higher end of things, I think Schmidt squeezes between the Tangent and Z-Comp, and I think the Razer Gen 3, on the strength of how easy it is to use the high magnification, how excellent that eyepiece is, I think that's the best eyepiece in the business. Really kind of starts competing in that market. So these top-end Light Optics Works scopes are really knocking on the door of the alpha level stuff, and doing so for a lot less money. So it's kind of an interesting paradigm shift. What I would really like to see, I'd like to understand how well the next generation of the other Japanese OEM scopes is going to work, right? So there are three primary OEMs out of Japan. Light Optics Works, that we were just discussing, Japan Optics Limited, and I know they're making some changes, some new stuff is coming, and Kenko. It's a competitive situation. Light Optics Works with their latest 6 to 36 design. I think they've made a step forward. Will the other Japanese OEMs make an attempt, a step toward catching up? Perhaps I just don't really have a good answer for it. Do you see Leica possibly coming to compete with Tangent on the highest end scopes? They're capable enough, you think? Yeah, of course they're capable. I don't know. Leica doesn't. I don't have any insight into what Leica is doing. I was very disappointed when they pulled Magnus from the US market. I think Magnus to date is still the best second focal plane rifle scope design I've ever seen. And if they were to take the Magnus optical system and adapt it to front focal plane with some other features, yeah, it would be absolutely competitive with the Tangents. But I don't. Doesn't sound like. Once again, I'm guessing, but doesn't sound like. Doesn't appear that Leica is hugely interested in that. And to be fair, that's pretty understandable. So the high-end market is not very large. It's growing, I think, but it's not very large. And there are several well-entrenched, very strong players. If I were a rifle scope company looking to, optics company looking to jump into the rifle scope world to a somewhat more significant degree, it's very interesting. Sorry, I get distracted. So the way the lighting in this room is, and I don't have any other lights, unfortunately. My forehead looks red, like I'm a Klingon. Very interesting. The light is here right above me. I can't really move it. I look like a Star Trek Klingon. Very interesting. But anyhow, if I were an optics company jumping into this world, would I want to jump into the highest end of conventional rifle scopes? I don't know. It's a tough question. There might not be enough money there to justify the development costs, and development costs would be significant. $1,500 Leica M Plus seems to be not making a splash at all in the US market. No, but it is a very nice scope. So I saw briefly a 3 to 15 by 44. I wanted to do a big hunting scope comparison, and I've been just so busy. The world is at war, so my day job is going nuts. It is May 15th. I used to say this is my 13th trip this year, but no. So I look at every time I have a trip, I need to fill out an expense report, right? So that my company reimburses me for the travel expenses. So this is going to be my 14th expense report this year. And we're in the middle of May. So the world has gone nuts, and I have not been able to do the extensive hunting scope comparison I really wanted to. Now, after this, I'm going to try to. My kids are going on summer break, so I want to stay home for a while. Hopefully, I'll be able to do a little bit more. Leica M Plus 3 to 15 by 44 is one of the scopes I really want to test. It's fairly compact. It seems to be well optimized. It seems to perform extremely well. But M Plus is not a Leica design. It's like an influence design, but I think most of it comes from Japan, presumably from Light Optics Works. Somewhat may be made to Leica's specifications, not 3 to 50, 3 to 18 by 44, sorry. A lot of it may be made to Leica specifications, or it could just have Leica specific turrets. And what Leica did with the PRS 5 to 30 scope, I think it was mostly Light Optics Works scopes with scope with Leica's eyepiece. And I would not be surprised if M Plus is something along those same lines. That's not a bad thing, right? But if Leica does something in Germany, it's not going to be $1,500. It's going to be more along the lines of the Magnus. Why M Plus is not making a splash? I assume it's not. I haven't really looked very much. It's an open question, but a lot of it comes down to marketing proliferation. I just don't see that much on it. I don't see a ton of reviews. I don't see it. I don't see it being talked about. I don't know why. It seems like a very nice scope. Interesting. Light Optics became a Leica OEM, basically. Light Optics Works OEMs for a ton of people. Sometimes builds scopes, sometimes provides lenses. Not just Leica, Zeiss S3 is a Light Optics Works scope. They've done work for Leica. They do a ton of work for Vortex. Vortex is probably their biggest customer. Who else? So Element, Light Optics Works. Delta gets a lot of the Japanese stuff from Light Optics Works. Who else? Just going through the list. I don't know if Leupold gets stuff from them or not. Wouldn't surprise me if they got lenses from them, but I don't know. Burris does not work with Light Optics Works that I know of. Once again, unless they get lenses from them. Who else? It's Maven is Light Optics Works mostly. So Light Optics Works is very, very prominent. Mr. Megagoach. Good to see you here, sir. Excluding the TT hunter scopes, what is your favorite crossover FFP hunting optic? I really haven't been that impressed with any of the new releases lately. So one of my favorites is still the Razer HDL HT 4.5 to 22 by 50. I think given the price and how lightweight it is, it's a spectacular scope. There's no perfection in this world. Edge performance is not as good as I'd like, but center field performance is excellent. Turrets feels a little bit soft by the track, and they don't go out of adjustment. I think as far as crossover scopes of Razer HDL HT 4.5 to 22 by 50 is easily one of the best ones. Going further down in terms of magnification range and stuff, last year I hunted with a tracked toric 2.5 to 15 by 34. That's more or less the same scope as the Maven 2.5 to 15 by 44 that you're talking about, different turrets. And I liked it. It's a little heavier than I'd like, but it's bearable. And if you want this sort of a type of a scope under 1K, I think Track did a very good job with it. I'm talking about the illuminated model, and I like it enough where let it stay, right? So I'm gonna divest it. Link, an X8 still made by Light Optics Works or made in US now? To the best of my knowledge, it's made by Light Optics Works. I don't know. I don't track that very much. Even if they put a made in US label on it, it would still be pretty much made by Light Optics Works. Maybe that attach eyepiece in US or something, but doesn't make a ton of difference, honestly. Mr. Cuball, do you know who makes Citron S8? So Citron is a house brand for a Japanese OEM called Kenko. So anything Citron is going to be made by Kenko, either in Japan, like the S8, or in the Philippines. They do not do anything in China, to the best of my knowledge. Maybe buy some parts, like mechanical parts and stuff. How do you compare the S8 versus Razer Gen 3? So overall, I think Gen 3 is a better scope. S8 optically is very good, especially in terms of center resolution. It is really excellent. I think Razer Gen 3 carries contrast a little bit better, and it's a little bit better off axis. S8 turrets have a little slop on them, which I thought was odd for a scope this expensive. And S8 turrets, S8 reticles are a little bit odd. The tree reticle is just weird, but the non-tree reticle is perfectly fine. But in terms of retaining zero and all that, I think both of them have been very good. Tracking on the ones I've seen has been very good. Razer Gen 3 is a little bit easier to get behind. So on balance, I think Gen 3 is a better scope. But if you are a paper shooter, for example, and your primary interest in center field performance, S8 does very, very well. Nice scope in many ways. I wish they would clean up a couple of things, but S8 is fundamentally an interesting design. There is a front focal plane 2.5 to 10 Mark IV. Yes, I have one. But I feel like Leopold is able to make a scope that competes with LHT 4.5 to 22. So the Mark IV line kind of goes after that same market to a good degree. Another Mark IV I'd like to look at eventually is a 4.5 to 18 by 22. That would be more of a direct competitor for the LHT. I saw it briefly at SHOT Show. I thought it looked very promising, but until I tested, I can't really do much in terms of recommending it. I plan to spend in the very, very near future some significant quality time with a 2.5 to 10. It's a design I'm very interested in. And I think it's going to give me a better insight into the Mark IV scopes. What I have seen so far has been good. Barring some reliability issues, which I have not seen or heard of yet, I think Mark IV is going to do exceedingly well for Leopold. But the Mark IV FFP is another case of people projecting. When it first came out, it doesn't have side focus, right? And before anyone ever saw it, a ton of people immediately discarded it, said it's a piece of manure, not so because it does not have side focus. Well, it's entirely possible for that for their specific application. Site focus is a requirement, but I can make a very, very solid case that for the significant majority of people interested in a 2.5 to 10 power front focal plane scope, side focus is not a huge priority. Now that I've looked at it a little bit, I'm perfectly fine with it not having side focus. So, just important to kind of be able to recognize where you're talking about your personal preferences and where you should be thinking about, well, how will it do overall? So, link. I saw the 4.5 to 18 has a 34 millimeter tube and 28 ounces. I mean, it could have been a 30 millimeter tube with lower weight. Somewhat, right? So tube diameter by itself does not make a ton of difference for weight. So, but you lose some adjustment range. I have a strong suspicion, although I don't know for sure, is that in a design like that, a 34 millimeter versus 30 is more about marketing than anything else. Well, but once again, does help with the adjustment range. And 28 ounces is a little bit heavier than I'd like, but it's the same general weight as Tangent Hunter, which is I think 26, 27 ounces, something like that. So for a crossover design, it is a reasonable weight. A while back, admittedly a while back, I made an attempt to define what I think are crossover rifle scopes, as in crossover between precision and hunting. And for me, that weight has to be basically less than 30 ounces. 30 ounces is a somewhat arbitrary number, but you have to put that number somewhere. If they stuck it into a 30 millimeter tube, okay, maybe it would be 26 ounces. Hard to say for sure. Would I have preferred that personally for my needs? Yes. But every time you look on different forums or talk to people, people think by definition that 34 millimeter is better than 30. How many times you go to hydrate now, people say, I'm looking for a particular scope, and they will say, I'm looking for a 34 millimeter tube. And you ask them why? Well, that's because they're convinced that 34 millimeter is going to be better than 30. Why that's better, nobody can tell me, right? There's no reason why it would necessarily be better. But people believe that, so go figure. Mr. Alexander Unterberg, what do you think about the Collis K328i? My only frame of reference is the old 624i, and it was not super sharp at max power. I now have the Zeiss 6-36, but the large field of view of the Collis 328 is appealing. So I've only seen the Collis at SHOT Show. I thought it was very well done. I thought it was very weird that it has a 50 millimeter objective instead of 56. But the huge eyepiece looked to be pretty well corrected. So I have not seen it outdoors though. The 6-24 Collis optically was kind of a turd. Not good enough for that price range. The 328i looks to be better, but I don't know. And given my current boycott of Swarovski and Collis, I do not anticipate doing a long-term testing. So if you buy it and play with it, let me know how it goes. From what I've seen, I thought it was a good design, and then step up from what I've seen from Collis lately, because I think 6-24 and 5-25 optically was subpar for the category. Very good mechanically though. Mr. Linked. There has not been anyone wanting to get into the concept that making higher power full-featured scope until PO's weight range that makes the LHT 315 and 4.5 22 last for so long. It's not easy to make lightweight scopes, and many companies and many different OEMs don't seem to be hugely interested in that. Maybe because it's hard, or maybe because they don't think there is a market there. I don't know. But you're right. There has not been a ton of lightweight scopes. But Leopold Mark IV is definitely a step in that direction. Mr. Cutbucket's here. Good to see you, sir. Still one of the more creative names I've seen on YouTube. So I have a noob question. If I have something like a Photo 16 FFP with all the features I want, what are the actual risks associated with using and or storing it as a fixed 10x? I am not sure. I understand. What do you mean by risks? Can you clarify what you mean? It's kind of an interesting thing. So if you have a variable scope, if you want to use it as a fixed 10 power, nobody's stopping you. If you're just trying to develop some skills and put in some practice, it's not a bad idea. Pick a magnification, leave it on it, and use it that way. But I'm not entirely sure what you mean by risks. Sorry, I think I could use a clarification here. Interesting way to phrase a question. Kind of trying to massage this in my head to see if I can make out what you really mean. But frankly, unsuccessfully. Interesting. See, I don't know. Going back to this whole business of, so I'm going to lean back. I had a long day. All right, here's a clarification. If I leave the magnification ring at 10x, instead of turning it back down to 4x for storage, okay, I've been told it would damage the scope somehow. That's horseshit. No, it's not going to damage the scope. You can store it on any magnification. It makes no difference. If it genuinely makes sense to store rifle scopes on some sort of a lowish magnification, primarily because if you just pick up a rifle and need to quickly find a target in your field of view, you want to start on a lower magnification where you have wide field of view, and then zoom in once you've identified your target. That's in terms of the damage to the scope, you can store it in any magnification you want, makes no difference. Mr. Ling, I don't know if you saw my post, but SIG is coming out with a tripod soon. Yeah, I saw your post. You asked me about leg diameters. I replied to it. So good. Everybody should be having a tripod. Shooting off the tripod is extremely common now. I do it all the time. I have a couple of new tripods coming in that I'm going to test, so they'll do a couple more videos talking about tripods. I have a new, moderately inexpensive one from Sunway, and I have the much better optimized latest version of the dome top tripod coming from Field Optics Research. And I think I saw it at Chacha. I thought it was excellent. And in terms of usability, overall, I will have to say that the dome top tripod design for Field Optics is the best I've tried yet. I have one of the early ones. It has some rough edges, but it was kind of a proof of concept and it works phenomenally well. And this new one that should be here in about a month or so, ballpark, I think is going to knock everybody's socks off, I'll be honest with you. Mr. Alexander Unterberg, thanks for your thoughts on colors. Maybe this year we'll come out with an updated model of the Factor 27 at some point with larger field of view as well. Time flies, it has already been out for 5 years. Probably not, because that would violate the Kalles-Swarovski patent that Kalles and Swarovski have been fairly vigorously trying to enforce. So, and those patents are not going to expire anytime soon. I did a live stream on that a while back. Leica challenged it in Europe and got that idiotic patent. I think it's a completely fraudulent patent, personally. But then again, I'm not a patent lawyer, so take it for what it is. But because of that, I don't think you're going to see a ton of high-end front focal plane scopes with a director ratio of more than 5 that have a large field of view. Not for a little while. If you want that huge eyepiece, colors is probably your best bet. Pupil. How come March Highmaster scopes are mostly MOA? Been eyeing some models, I can't seem to find a Highmaster model that's mill radical in turrets. Am I missing something? So March has Highmaster front focal plane and second focal plane scope. The front focal plane, the most obvious one is a 5 to 42 by 56. I've got a couple of them. It's a nice scope. The high magnification stuff is second focal plane, and it's aimed at paper shooters, F-class guys, etc. They do more. They primarily use MOA, and they primarily use second focal plane designs, and that's what it's aimed at. I'm not an F-class guy. I don't have one of those. I've seen it briefly. I thought it was excellent. I might look at it more carefully later in the year, but it's not. F-class is not a discipline I know a ton about, so I don't know how useful that would necessarily be. Link. The profit margin of shooting spotting scope tripods seems to be very high. That is true. One of the reasons everybody should have tripods is that you can kind of bundle it with the optics, etc., and you can make some money. Chinese OEMs, there are a couple of main ones, have gotten very good at making good enough quality, very respectable quality actually, on a reasonable budget. So it is a nicely profitable thing. Optics also quite profitable, which is one of the reasons why quite a few manufacturers have gone into that. I think the profit margins on that, on various accessories, is generally higher than on firearms, for example. Again, I don't know all the costs that well, so it's a lot of it is educated guesswork on my part. Link. Schmidt and Bender 10 to 60 has front focal plane and mill versions. Correct. It has front focal plane and second focal plane versions. But it is second focal plane, I think, is MOA. Front focal is mill-radian. Make a gauge. Have you spent much time with many of the high-end Kenko scopes? Does it seem like they are very popular? I've only seen reviews from Jim Fish. Yes, I've seen more or less all of them. I've talked about them a little bit here and there. I have not done too many super detailed reviews, but I've looked at them fairly thoroughly. I fully expect I'll be looking at several more. So I'm waiting for some of them to show up under other brand names, because that will mean different reticles and potentially different turrets. I think the reticles that Kenko Citron puts in their scopes are lacking. And the way I select what to review are kind of pre-screened scopes, right? I look at them a little bit and I decide if this is something I want to spend time on or not. For example, I seldom review MOA scopes. I have some that I'm reviewing, but it needs to have something else different that's of interest to me for me to spend a lot of time on it. And a reticle design is something that I will easily I will use to decide whether it's a scope I want to review or not. I spent a lot of time with S8. I was not itching to do anything especially thorough with S8 or S6 from Citron just because I didn't like the reticle options. They will be showing up before too long under different names because Kenko is an OEM, and at that point I will spend more time with them. Link. For Swara patent, if someone makes a 4x erector ratio with a bigger field of view, it won't have a problem with the patent because it has to be 5x or more erector ratio per their statement. To the best of my understanding, yes, that is correct. The basic problem is that on the high end of things, it would be very difficult to convince somebody to make a 4x erector. I would love for somebody to go and do a very large apparent field of view scope with a erector ratio of 4.7 or something like that, so almost 5. I think that would be kind of a little bit easier to optimize, and you can make a very, very solid design that way, and you won't have any problems with these silly Swarovski patterns. I think it is an opportunity that somebody's missing. I think I have seen one Citron 5 to 40 with 40 millimeter tube in the range, and I think it is good, but should be below 2500 to be competitive, not over 3K. I agree with that. I thought that 3K it was too much for that scope. For a little while, I saw them sold at around 2000 or 2200, something like that. And at that price, that's a very, very good deal. At 3K, I think the competition is very strong and much better rounded. Citron S8 had very significant strengths and significant weaknesses. And at 3 grand, I want a little bit more balanced performance. I'll be honest with you. Let's see. Trying to remember, did Citron discontinue that crazy tree article they had in the S8 or not yet? Let me take. So I saw it with that tree radical, which I thought was just completely nuts. But the non-tree radicals, okay. Yeah, the non-tree radical was called LRM, and it was okay. And the tree radical is MH6, and that one was just weird. But honestly, like if they fixed the radical nonsense and firmed up the turrets a little bit, I thought the scope would do extremely well. One of the things I would love to see, so Citron on the S5 10 to 60 uses this dual speed sight focus. I thought it was a really cool thing I would like to see that used pop up a little bit more. But you can't always get what you want. Cubal Dvor sometimes has the S8 for $1,900. Yeah, for $1,900, that's lots of image quality for that money. They say it is definitely not a $3,000 with the turrets they have. I fully agree. Citron is Citron is a mystifying company to me, to a good degree. I have a suspicion, just my opinion, right, unconfirmed by anything, it's just a guesswork, that Kenko is sufficiently concerned about not damaging their OEM business that they are not putting any real emphasis into making Citron brand competitive. Being a house brand of such a significant OEM like Kenko, if Citron really wanted to, they could be easily one of the truly dominant forces within the rifle scope world. That would require competent product management and competent marketing. All that, and I can't help but think that Citron is almost intentionally held back a little bit in order to not screw up the OEM business that Kenko has. Again, just my own personal guesswork. I could very well be wrong. I have a soft spot in my heart for Citron. The first decent scope I ever bought was a first generation Citron S2 329 by 42 with a mil dot radical. I think I still have that scope somewhere. In optics design, is center field resolution contradictory to edge clarity, especially outer field image flatness? No, it's just difficult to get everything properly optimized. Center field is arguably more important for aiming devices, so you want to make sure you have that. And you don't want to sacrifice that. It's not a tug of war per se, it's just different optimization priorities. Just never mind. The manufacturer should label their scope as 5.5 and have it underperform at the optimum range. It would just be slightly out of specs. Yeah, it's possible. 4.5. For the Swara pattern, I assume that's what you're talking about. The magnification ratio between the higher top end and lower end magnification to infringe on that pattern has to be 5 times or higher. right? So if I was an optics manufacturer, I'd make something that's like 4.97x precisely, just to spit into the Swarovski eye. But, yeah, that might be risky, but 4.5 director ratio works just fine. That would not violate any patents, even if I think that's a bullshit patent. Again, as always, general disclaimer, I'm not a patent lawyer, just my opinion, yada, 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 yada. Some scopes have noticeably shorter erector tube than others. Is there any reason for it? Well, the reason for it is that if you can get away with it without sacrificing other things, you want it to be short. For many modern scopes, especially the ones that will be mounted on ERs or something like that. Historically, scopes with very short main tube were not ideal because most rifle scopes were mounted on bolt guns, frequently with split bases, short base on the front ring of the receiver, short base on the back. If the main tube of the rifle scope was too short, you couldn't mount it on long action rifles and all that. As that part of the market has changed significantly, we have systems with a single piece rail dominate, or AR-15 type guns, etc., who use integrated mounts. But there is no compelling reason to try to keep the tube as fairly long. Now, for the optical to mechanical design of the erector system, shorter is harder. Like with optics, short optical systems is just harder to do. But there has been a little bit of a trend to make them a little shorter. With the Vortex AMG 1 to 10 by 24, how short they made the 10-time erector is pretty freaking impressive, while maintaining good optical performance. We might see a little bit more of that as we go along. As I've mentioned elsewhere, what I really want to see, I want somebody to experiment with really short erector systems and make an ultra short 1 to 4 scopes. It's like 5 or 6 inches long if possible. That to me would be near ideal general purpose AR-15 optic, but I have not seen anything like that. There is a Chinese design for this 3 to 12 by 44 scope. US Optics uses it as a TS12, and I think the OEM is a company behind Vector Optics. I think I've seen it from them as well. In theory, if you took that as a base, you could potentially look it up. You could potentially put a shorter, smaller objective lens system or try to make LPVO out of it. That would be kind of an interesting idea, but it would need to be optimized a little bit differently for low power use. Alexander Unterberg, trying to find the name of the patent number so I can look it up. Does anybody in the chat have a link handy? I did. I talked about it and posted some links in the past. I think I have it on my website somewhere. Just it's on darklordofoptics.com. Let me see if I have it. Hold on. Swarovski patent. I'm doing a search. I do not see it. Yeah, I don't see it here. I don't need to look for it. I had it somewhere. I don't have it on hand. If you go on my website. I don't know if you're a member there. Post there. Remind me. I'll find it for you. Mega Gouch, can you please ask Vortex to do a front focal plane model of the new 3 to 15 by 44 Viper HD VMR4 thickened? Slightly would be amazing. Okay, here's a question for you. So, given the other scopes that Vortex already has, what is their motivation to make a front focal plane version of 3 to 15 by 44? Given that they already have a front focal plane 3 to 15 by 44 PST Gen 2, and they have a front focal plane 3 to 18 by 42 strike eagle, and they have a front focal plane 3 to 15 by 44 venom. What is the motivation to make a front focal plane 3 to 15 Viper HD? That's an interesting question. So there are a couple of questions here that I'll address in a moment. From Link, Viper PST 3 to 15 by 44 is discontinued, I guess. No, it's not. So the Viper HD and Viper PST Gen 2 are parallel and separate lines. PST Gen 2 3 to 15 is not discontinued. There are a couple of reticle versions that are discontinued. That's EBR2 reticles. That's what Midway is closing out. But the scope itself is not discontinued. It persists with the version of an EBR7 reticle. Link. What is the major reason for the tracking adjustment error and horizontal shift when adjusting elevation? I heard that Light Optics Works QC standard is 2% errors allowed, which would be 0.2 mil at 10 mil travel. The QC standard is different for different customers. 2% is what they try to push on everyone. I know that Element, when they started doing theirs, forced them into less than 1%. And most of their stuff is less than 2 and less than 1%. It's just about catching outliers. Tracking adjustment error comes down to various mechanical irregularities, right? You can have improperly machined stem, it's threaded and you can accumulate error going that way. You can have weird sideways shifts if the contact point, so at the bottom of the third stem is a contact pad, and how it contacts the erector tube. There are several different designs out there, most of them not hugely public. Um, Intricacies of that interface, although usually it's not a big deal, it's a flat pad. But intricacies of that interface is what can cause these sideways shifts when you're doing your elevation adjustment. These usually one or two springs at kind of opposing at 45 degrees. If the spring is not properly calibrated, you can have some occasional issues, although that's a little bit less common these days. I see it once in a while. The bulk of it is usually somewhere in the interface between the contact pad and the erector tube. Cue ball. Speaking of USO, how do they charge so much for Chinese scopes? Granted, very nicely made, but that's a lot of money for Chinese scopes. I have the TS20 2.5 to 20. It is quite nice and tracks very well. So interesting question. I know they do extensive QC in the United States. And I also know, let's say the 3 to 12 I've seen from US Optics is notably better than on outside very similar looking 3 to 12s I've seen from China. So I have a suspicion that they force the Chinese OEM to potentially use higher quality parts, do more QC. Something that's probably why they're able to charge a bit more. Mega gauge capped windage, locking elevation, better illumination, thicker reticle, less weight than the PST Gen 2. So other than the weight, or even the weight, I think you just described the Strike Eagle 3 to 18 by 42. So, well, actually, on that one, illumination still illuminates the whole tree. So, but aside from that, yeah, I'm with you. For me, the defining thing probably is less weight, right? If I would like to have a front focal plane 3 to 15 by 44 as well, and the Viper HD might be a good platform for it. But the truth is that if you look at the crossover market, even Western hunting, high magnification absolutely outsells lower magnification. I don't know for sure with how it is with PST Gen 2. 3 to 15 is a better scope than the 5 to 25, but that 5 to 25 outsells it. I know with the with the razors, people just buy high magnification. I keep on hoping is that we start doing more with thermal clip-ons. Um, People will appreciate having lower magnification a little bit more. But in terms of what people actually buy, I have not seen that. From the standpoint of return on your investment, if you're going to do one FFP model, you should be doing high magnification, and which is exactly what Vortex did with the 5 to 25. Now, I do suspect that if enough people want it, they can do a front focal 3 to 15 if they want, but I don't know if they are itching to do so. Okay. Okay. Cubel, have you tried Heritage Arms cold shot base? Supposedly, according to some YouTube videos, it can track quite accurately, which is quite surprising. Never even heard of it. Let me look it up. Hold on. Heritage Arms cold shot base. What the hell is that? Okay. Okay, so, alright. It's a base that you can dial in elevation. Interesting. So, conceptually, it has some. Yeah, it might work well, actually. So, I have the adjustable slope mount from Aerotech. This is, also pivot in the front, adjustment in the back, but this one is made to adjust a little bit more. Very interesting. How much does it cost? Let's see it. Oh, there we go. Shop now. Interesting design. $500. Yeah, I don't know. It would be interesting to look at. I'll consider it. I have not tried it. Never even heard of it until today. Thanks for pointing it out. It would be very interesting to see how they handle the lateral movement the way they did the design. But it might very well work brilliantly. I don't. Interesting. Okay, let's see. Better Mega Gouge, continuing the conversation about the front focal plane 3 to 15. A better glass and not made in China compared to Venom and Strike Eagle. Also will appeal to people wanting a front focal plane 3 to 15 LHD. So this is genuinely a reasonable point. Now, whether it's better glass than the Strike Eagle remains to be seen. I'm quite impressed with the 3 to 18 Strike Eagle, I have to admit. I'd like to see the Venom to see if it's a better glass or not. I absolutely agree that Vortex never made the front focal plane 3 to 15 LHD, and the Viper HD would appeal to that crowd. I'm part of that crowd. But they don't seem to think there is a market there. They may very well be right. They generally know what they're doing. I think there is a market there, but if you're trying to figure out how to make money in the optics market, you should listen to Vortex, not to me. Like a coach, unfortunately, it seems like the crossover MPVO market isn't very big outside of a few online forums. So crossover market's big enough. There is enough entrants now, and they are very competent. The MPVO market demand, I don't think it's huge, but it seems to be getting bigger, and that's one of the reasons we got the Leupold Mark 4 2.5 to 10. That's an attempt to hit that market. It will be very interesting to see how the sales go over the next year. So the market is a little bit soft right now. So we'll see. As I think it's gonna, a lot's gonna depend on what happens during the election. If Biden somehow gets, or whoever Democrats run, somehow gets reelected, I think we'll see another rise in the firearms related market. But time will tell. Link. Lots of burst scopes are made in US now, I noticed. Do you know what models? Also, How's the XTR Pro stack up against Mark IV and Mark Vs? So Burris makes scopes in the United States. So the Burris lineup, I think only XTR Pro is made in the US, at least that I'm aware of. A Burris factory in Colorado makes a few other scopes, but they are made for Steiner, right? So not under Burris's name. Under Burris, it's only XTR Pro. In terms of how it stacks up against Mark IV and Mark Vs, so I have not looked at the high magnification Mark IV, so I don't know how that stacks up. Against the Mark V, I think XTR Pro is very competitive. I probably slightly prefer the XTR Pro. It's a little bit cheaper for similar configuration and has wider field of view. It would be very interesting to compare it side by side, XTR Pro with Mark V 5 to 25. I have the XTR Pro. I like the scope a lot. I think in terms of the controls and stuff, Mark V is a more polished scope. In terms of resolution, general optical performance, I think they're very close. XTR Pro is wider field of view, which I appreciate. But I think the turrets are more consistent in the Mark V in terms of feel. The XTR Pro, they're a little bit stiff, a little bit simpler. Yeah, nice scopes. Just an average man. People are lazy. They don't want to buy spotting scope, so they buy a high power rifle scope to use. That's possible. I don't think that's it. I think just general bigger is better sentiment that is so prevalent in the US. But perhaps you're right. Mr. Rody 7420. One downside I see with lower magnified optics is set parallax. Doesn't matter. So to 400 to 500 yards, but at 600 and 700 yards, start seeing the parallax error. Correct, but there are plenty of somewhat lower powered scopes that have side focus. Virtually all 3 to 15 scopes, for example, have side focus. With a 2.5 to 10, some have side focus, some don't. But there is no reason to not have side focus there, should the application require it. With a 2.5 to 10 by 42 Mark IV, the depth of field is very good. But again, if you're going to be primarily shooting to 1,000 yards, this is not the ideal scope. It'll work, but it's not ideal. Mr. Cubal, poor man's March Genesis. So that's about that Heritage Arms base. Yeah, sort of, yes. Link. It's really not the glass cost though. FCD 100, 56 millimeter size, cost like $20 each. Correct. It's not just the glass cost, yes. There's a good amount that goes in there. It's always that 10x number to get the sight focus. Not always, but a lot of the time, yes. That's very common. Look, so one of my favorite prismatic right now, for example, is the Element Immersive 5 power scope, 5 to 13. That has sight focus. But with lower power scopes, the sight focus is more important for shooting very close, right? And the reason I like to have it, given a choice, is that for dry practice indoors, it's very convenient. For shooting further out on low powers, you don't really need sight focus most of the time. But as magnification goes up, it does help. But again, this business of sight focus and everything is a little bit of projecting. I like to have it because I have a nasty habit of using comparatively low power scopes for comparatively obscene distances. But vast majority of people who buy a 2.5 to 10 power scopes could not care less about sight focus. It's just one more thing to mess with. They do the entirety of their shooting at moderate ranges, and the whole sight focus business to them is a complete mystery. Hell, on the sniper side, I think yesterday I was reading a thread. Some guy bought the new Vortex Viper 5 to 25 and was complaining that it's blurry, and it turned out he doesn't know what sight focus is. His previous scope was a standard 3 to 9 by 40. He has no idea side focus exists and that it focuses the image. Okay, so I mean, there is a very significant proportion of the shooting market that has no idea that side focus exists, don't know what the eyepiece focus is for. They just think you grab it and shoot, and that's it. So, link. Scope advertising never talks about depth of field. Is there a reason? Uh, yeah, but that reason will get a lot of people upset at me. So basically, because most people who do rifle scope advertising don't know anything about rifle scopes, can't spell depth of field if their life depended on it. Yeah. There's some exceptions to it, but they don't know what it is. It's not a concept that's especially easy to explain in the 1.5 sentences you have for advertising. So it's just not something that is easy to communicate. But to me, it's important, so I talk about it. I'm going to be covering it a lot more in the review of a different spotting scope I've been looking at. So. Link. How was your trip to Utah? So bad I was not home. Yeah, I thought about reaching out to you, but honestly, my trip to Utah was very, very good. Loved the place. It was short. My daughter shot in the archery nationals. That was Saturday. We stayed overnight. Sunday was my birthday, so we woke up in the morning, drove out to Moab, did some off-roading and all that. That's how I celebrated my birthday, and I had a blast. And Monday we drove home. So it was a very short trip, but we really liked Utah, so I think we'll come again. Definitely to Moab, quite likely also to Salt Lake City. Honestly, we really enjoyed the place. Next time. Mr. Average Man, have you done a talk on holographic sight options recently? Sorry, it's been a while since I have been logged on. I haven't don't have I've talked about it a little bit, not too much, but with holographic sights, I mean the landscape has not really changed substantially. There are two primary options. There are the different EOTechs, which have very nice holographics, and there is the Vortex UH1 Gen 2. And as far as holographics go, that's pretty much it. They both work. I slightly prefer the Vortex, primarily because it's versus the XPS 3, I think. So, EOTech I looked at. I slightly prefer the Vortex, primarily because it's about $100 cheaper usually. They both work. They both work very well. They have the same more or less strengths and weaknesses. Super flat image. I think these aren't balanced still the fastest of all sights. And the battery life is not as good as conventional red dots because there's a laser inside. And not an LED. And that's more or less it. So if you're a diligent person who can maintain batteries reasonably well and remember to swap them out here and there, I think holographics are wonderful. If I were setting up a rifle for somebody serious about this who pays attention, intended primarily for moderate ranges where you need speed, performance, and durability, I think holographics are amazing. I like them. I mean, that's why when I use it. But the simple truth is for the people who don't pay attention, just want to put something on, and this is not something they do all the time. Modern red dot sights where the battery life is functionally close to forever are probably the better choice. They do have more parallax. The field is not as flat. They are marginally slower, but you can only appreciate those speed differences if you actually practice. So if you practice, if you're serious about this, I think holographics are an excellent way to go. But for the majority, the incredibly long battery life of modern red dot sights is probably an advantage. If you want me to get into more detail on anything, please clarify. I'll be happy Mr. Rodi 7420, have you DLO seen any advancements in coatings for optics detection improvement? Seems like optics are moving more toward electronic features and following up, and coatings development is on the back burner. So part of this is accurate, part of it is not. Optics are moving toward various electronic features, so electro-optical integration is a big deal, and whoever is going to do it best is going to do well in the modern optics world, and everybody's working on it to some degree. As far as coatings development, honestly, high quality coatings have become so commoditized. There's not that much more to do. Modern coatings are very good and very available. 20 years ago, better coatings would easily make a difference. It's not really so much the case anymore. There's still some differences, right? They're not all created equal, but there's enough companies out there who do coatings, and if you're developing a rifle scope, getting access to very, very high quality anti-reflection coatings is very straightforward. There are a ton of options out there. So I think with the coatings, they've gotten as far as they're going to go under most circumstances. And that's one of the reasons there is not that much development. It's that the bulk of development has been done. You're not going to get a ton better, right? The quality of the AR coatings is so good that you would need to spend a lot of development money for very small incremental improvements, and R&D money is really going in other directions. Mr. Average Man, happy belated birthday. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate it. I am sufficiently old that now to make myself feel better, I convert my age to hexadecimal, which is the second nerdiest thing I've ever seen, I think. And in hexadecimal, I'm 30. Makes me feel marginally better about getting old. Not that much better. There are not any other red dot sights with clear lenses other than shield sights. I'm not sure what you mean. Most modern red dot sights are quite nice in terms of lens, how clear the lenses are. The aim points are good, and quite a few others. There are some, depending on, you'll have a little bit of a tint. There's always a little bit of a tint with any of those because they need to reflect red. But shields do this color balancing very well. Leupold delta points do a very good job. The latest Trigicons are not bad at all. Holosun, although I'm not a big fan of the company, they make very nice red dot sights, and also tint is controlled very nicely. I think even relatively inexpensive red dots now are getting quite good clarity-wise. The latest Vortex red dots are very good and very durable. The things called Defender, CCW, something like that. And there is more stuff coming. I've been looking at this enclosed red dot sights from Gideon Optics. Oh Jesus, what is it? The Mediator, I think. What's happening with my memory? Hold on a second. I think it's called the Mediator Gideon Optics. They have a bunch of red dots, but I've only looked at the enclosed one, and I like it a lot. Like, it does a very good job. I have a 1x prismatic from them, and the enclosed one, the Mediator. It's about $250, and in terms of lens quality, maintaining reasonable color tint and all that, they're very good. So I think that's another thing that has gotten reasonably commoditized. So Mr. Rodi 7420H converted to hexadecimal. Well, yeah, nerdy people do nerdy things, right? At some point, you just have to recognize who you are and accept it. I'm old and nerdy. For those of you who are not into hexadecimal, I turned 48. 48 in decimal is 13 hexadecimal. I'm done with my energy drink. Time to switch to iced tea. All right, guys, we've been at it for about an hour and a half. I'll take a couple more questions and now we'll wrap up for today. Thank you for sticking with me, although this was not planned or announced. I appreciate so many of you being able to jump onto the live stream, essentially on a very, very short notice. It is, what is it, about 11 o'clock here, so I'm start wrapping up. And to be out of here tomorrow morning. I have another half a day or so to White Sands Missile Range, some work stuff. And then it's about 4 hours for me to drive home to Albuquerque. I am gonna go grab something real quick. I'll mute myself. If there's anything else, put it in the chat. I'll be back in a sec. All right, let's see. What else do I have? Blink, good night. Mr. Moondog Industries, happy birthday, young man. Thank you. Thank you, Coach. Thank you for entertaining my questions, ranting. I like questions. That's why I told you guys many times. One of the reasons I'm doing a lot more live streams and videos is that I like the interaction. I like the questions. It makes me think. Mr. Just an Average Man, Gideon Optics reminds me of Gideon Springs. The site Chosen Warriors. Yeah, there's something to that. Mike Branson is behind Gideon Optics, and he always has interesting names. Mr. Rhodes said, I've been a subscriber of yours for years. Love the content, learned so much. Really very grateful for the commitment to sharing your knowledge. Lots of light bulb moments. Wonderful. I'm happy to help. I enjoy these kind of things immensely. As I said, I like the interaction. I like the Q&As. And if I find a particularly interesting question, then I will sometimes write it down and develop it further, do an article on it. Most of the ideas I get on the things that I want to explore further and think about more, I get from these live streams, occasionally from forum interactions, from questions I get. You guys think differently than I do. Oftentimes, the way a question is phrased creates a light bulb moment for me, because that gives me an opportunity to look at a particular topic or subject from a different angle that had never occurred to me before. So I do appreciate the questions. Mr. Cuball, happy belated birthday. I'm just a few months older. Good night. Good night to you, sir. Mr. Northwest Guns stopped by just as I'm beginning to wrap up. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Derek. Let's see. All right, if there's anything else, I'll give it a few more minutes. And then I'll bid you good night and sleep. What else you got, guys? Okay. So my day job is I run a U.S. subsidiary of an Israeli company. We primarily deal with the military, so because of that, they can't deal directly with the factory in Israel. So I run the company in the U.S., deal with our business, and the way my life goes, if I don't turn in and turn off all my gadgets early enough, right now it's 11 here. The guys in Israel are waking up and starting their day. It's about, I think, was it a 9 hour difference between me and them? It's about 8 a.m. there. If I don't turn all my gadget off and unplug and go to sleep early, uh, I'm gonna get embroiled in work email again. Mr. Megaguch, topic for another day. Your current and dream setups for subsonic target shooting and hunting. That's not a very long topic. I can expound on it at a later point, but my current setup is sort of kind of like my dream setup because I got what I wanted. My subsonic target and hunting setup is the fix by Q rifle in 8.6 blackout. The scope on it is a March dual focal plane, 1.5 to 15 by 42, which is just right for this kind of a setup. And the only thing that I'm not 100% sure of what kind of a thermal clip-on do I want to assign to it. At the moment, I'm testing a very large but really excellent hybrid 75 clip-on from iRay. But other than the thermal, I think I have pretty much the optimal subsonic setup that exists. The one exception to it is that so mine has a 16-inch barrel, and there are two reasons why my 8.6 blackout fix has a 16-inch barrel. One is that I don't want to Form 1 anything, so I have to abide by the 16-inch barrel limitation. But another one is that I do hunt with both subsonic and supersonic rounds. And while for subsonic, there is no real reason to have a 16-inch barrel, 12 would have been just fine. For supersonic, having a little bit more velocity does give me a little bit of an extra energy edge. At the moment, that rifle is waiting for. I have a couple of 8.6 suppressors sitting at ATF. One of them is going to essentially permanently go onto the fix, and another one is probably going to wait for a boombox, so I'll use it in something else in the meantime. But that's basically it. As far as the optics go, I am yet to see anything better suitable for subsonic use than the 1.5 to 15 by 42 March. Now, it is because it is such a large erector ratio, there are some limitations to that scope, right? But as a general purpose design, it is the best I've seen if you think of it as a combination of the optical and mechanical performance combined with flexibility in a very compact overall package. Mr. Average, get some rest, brother. Yeah, soon enough. Megaguts, what hunting projectiles ammo are you using? So I finally got projectiles from Discrete Ballistics that have those 280 grain lathe bullets that open up. I've seen the test results, so I'm going to be switching to those. For subsonic. For supersonic, I have been using 200 grain Bulldozer 2 bullets from Badlands Precision. I'm probably going to switch to new bullets that the Discrete Ballistics guys are working up with the Peregrine Ballistics out of South Africa. Again, lathed high quality bullets for hunting. For target shooting, I've been using subsonic 300 grain Lapua centers, and I need to do some experimentation with the Sierra Match Kings. Rode 7420, one of the scopes I have always wanted to look through. Dual focal plate, pretty cool. It is very cool. It's another rifle scope that's very misunderstood. It's a 10-time erector ratio. It's a very short overall scope. So on 15 power, eye box is a little bit tight, and overall image performance is not as good as with larger March scopes, right? There's no way to work around laws of physics, but it is still quite good. And the way I use that scope, it leaves most of its life on lower powers, below 10, right? And I only dial it up when I have, when I'm doing load development, I have a good shooting position, something like that. But the idea of a design like that is flexibility. I can literally do a little bit of everything with it. There's an old saying, jack of all trades, but master of none. The but that's not the complete saying, right? So there's another clause there that always gets forgotten. Jack of all trades, master of none, but much, much better than having none, right? So if you are going to have one general purpose scope for hunting, a little bit precision, a little bit of everything, that is easily one of the best ones out there. But if you are setting up a more specialized rig, yeah, you can do better. If you want to do it all with one rifle, that is probably it. Once I go home tomorrow, I'm planning to stay home for a few weeks. My kids have vacation during the summer. I'll do a little bit of travel. I want to swing by Wyoming, take my kids there. I have never seen it. I'll do some travel, but also I'm going to be home, spending time with my kids, and shooting a lot more through the summer. So I'll be wrapping up with quite a few reviews, and one of them will be on this March. I want to have to fit in by 42. I think it is a somewhat misunderstood and really well-made design. All right. With that, gentlemen, I am going to wrap this up and go to sleep. Thank you all for sticking with me. If there's anything I forgot, put it in the comment, and I'll look back on it and try to catch up with whatever I forgot to answer. And if I get an interesting question, it will be a topic for the next live stream. Just an average man. You probably have ranges everywhere to shoot. If you're ever out in Riverside, California area, need to shoot, hit me up. I have family in Riverside. I was actually there last month, but not for very long. Mega Gods, dual focal plane versus diffractive illumination. It depends. Both work. If you're really paranoid, dual focal plane. If you're okay, depending on the battery, diffractive illumination can simplify things. Schmidt DLCC 128 came out right when the LPVO was getting popular. I think LPVOs got popular before that, but DLCC is excellent, truly excellent. But I talked about that a little bit during, I think, last live stream, but that was on locals only, not on YouTube. There are different ways to approach dual focal plane designs. Maybe I need to revisit that a little bit more. All right. If I keep answering questions, I'll be here forever. It's time to wrap up. Good night, and thank you all.